Hey y'all, welcome back to Get Innovative, the podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Pate, K-12 Director of Technology and the founder of Get Innovative Strategic Consulting, where I provide K-12 schools and districts with strategic EdTech services. Okay, so if you follow me on social media, you may have seen my post where I shared the big news that I was offered an opportunity to be a part of the New Orleans Public Schools AI Task Force. And let me just tell y'all, I am beyond excited about this opportunity. Not only because I'm an EdTech leader, of course, but because I absolutely love AI. And I am the type of person that always tries to find the good in tech because I know how many people have already found the bad. But tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit of a recap of our first meetup, share some of thought-provoking questions that were asked of us, and I'll share my response to a few of them as well. So let's get into it. As I said, this AI task force is designed to basically get the voices of ed tech leaders, ed tech specialists, those who are at the forefront at their individual school sites, campuses, or CMOs, which stands for Charter Management Organizations, who are willing to have the conversation, provide their input and guidance into writing and crafting an AI policy for the NOLA public schools. Now, this is a big deal because we're talking about a school district that has gone through a lot over the years. And those of you who know that Hurricane Katrina kind of upended our entire city, but it did a number on our education system. And here in New Orleans, we're primarily all charter schools, which means it can run the gamut from campus to campus on what people are doing as it relates to technology. So I'm really excited to be able to sit down with the leaders over at NOLA Public Schools and discuss something we could do that's going to benefit all children across the city. So there's a lot more equity as it relates to EdTech. And of course, AI is top of mind for most schools, not simply because of the power of AI, but also because of some of the risks that are associated with using it. So we're going to dive into a little bit more of that in just a moment. So the first thing that we did at this meetup was more of like a pulse check where they went around the table and asked each of us, what is our school doing? What is the current AI use at each of our individual campuses or charter management organizations? But before I get into that, there was one thing that immediately concerned me about this meetup. And it wasn't the topic. It wasn't even the people in the room. It was the lack of people in the room. This particular task force opportunity was, I'm sure, offered to multiple EdTech leaders at various campuses across the city. But in that room, there were only 4 people represented for all of these schools in the city, myself included. And there were 4 people from the district. That stung a little bit and gave me a little bit of trepidation because I kept thinking to myself, where are the people? Why are they not in the room? And this is where I start to get really, really concerned about the future, about our kids, and how they're going to be able to access these tools and resources to help them when we don't even have someone who's sitting at the table who can be a voice for them. So, that being said, let's move on. All right. So, some of the things they asked us as it relates to the reality check, quote unquote, for each of our campuses were, what AI related tools or practices are already in use at your school? And I was happy to report that this past summer, in preparation for the 2025-26 school year, that myself, along with another colleague, had really started the groundwork for shaping and building what is now our AI policy. So we pulled together resources from various places. Our school being an IB school or International Baccalaureate school, we wanted to also consider the guidance that was coming from IB as well, and some of the state guidance that we had received. And we kind of compiled all that along with some other research from other institutions like Harvard and a few schools in Texas that had already started their AI programs, and created a extremely robust and detailed draft plan for AI implementation. So we also played around with the language too, because we wanted to make sure that teachers and students understood that this wasn't as much of the law as much as it was just more like guidance and guardrails. So we just landed on calling this an AI policy and guidelines situation versus saying an AI, requirements, because we recognize also that things are going to continue to evolve as we learn more about AI. Some of the things that we wrote in the policy that we were a little bit more loose on, we may want to restrict, and we may find areas where we want to be a little bit more forgiving. What we also did at my school is that we organized our policy into two sections, which is student facing and teacher facing. And we took each section and created a risk and benefits for each of those stakeholders. So we really, really took our time to draft this. We sat with the administration, master teachers, and so forth, and went through like literally combed through every single page of the policy as we had originally written it until we got to the current draft that it's in. And I keep calling it a draft because I just don't feel like this is going to be a situation where the document is finalized. This is going to be an evolving thing. And eventually we may get to that point. But for right now, that's what we did. Additionally, we ensured that our staff was aware of what tools we were putting our stamp of approval on, because we also recognize that even before we introduced this AI policy and guidelines, that teachers and students were probably already using AI in some capacity. But we wanted to at least let them know that, hey, we are opening the gate to use this tool, but these are the tools that are approved by us to use. And those two tools that we're focusing on this school year in particular, for obvious reasons, are Gemini and NotebookLM. Now, we did this simply because those two AI tools are already embedded and incorporated into our current Google for Education workspace ecosystem. So it's not another thing per se that we have to purchase or subscribe to. It's something that we're pretty much already paying for. And it's a great way for us to test the waters before we decide if we want to search for something else. I did, however, like what some schools mention is about they're choosing their tools based on a particular goal that they're trying to achieve. So, for example, one of the school's leaders shared that they are using a tool called Enlighten AI, I believe, and that tool is strictly meant for writing. It's a tool that's used to help rubric and grade and provide feedback for writing samples. And the reason why they went with that tool is because it was specifically for that purpose and that intention and that goal versus some of the tools that are more like Swiss Army knives and they do a tons of things. But some of these tools do so many things that they don't do anything particularly well. And so having tools that are specific to a particular subject area or a particular style of something might actually be helpful. So it's just something to consider as you're working towards building out your own AI policies at your schools. The other question that they asked us was who is using them and for what purpose? And so again, we've opened the door for our staff and our students to both use AI tools, but we want to make sure in our guidelines and policy currently that we explain what exactly that should look like. And we did a really, really good job of that, I believe. But I do think there's definitely going to be room for improvement. And I'm looking forward to a meeting I'm having later on this week with the same colleague that I did this initial groundwork with. So kind of follow up at this midpoint, if you will, in the year to see where we are. The other questions that they asked us was what is driving the use of AI? So efficiency, instructional needs, or student demands. And I'll be honest with you, I think all of those things are probably driving our thought about AI, but not everybody is actually using it to do those things just yet. I mean, obviously, we're probably thinking about how could this make my job easier? How could this make the lives of my teachers easier? How could this be make things easier for the students? How could this make lesson planning more efficient? How could this help my English language students, English language learners rather, synthesize and engage with text that may or may not be written in their home language? et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all the motivations right now I think most of us have as it relates to how we're going to be dealing with and facing AI going forward. So the next thing we did was we had a group discussion. And so I'm going to dive a little bit more into that in just a moment because I think it was very important that we had this discussion because it was good to just hear what other leaders, schools were thinking about and how they were viewing AI as a whole as well. As we started diving into the group discussion part and we talked about the risks, the needs, and some of the guardrails, it became very clear why this task force is so important. Because each school kind of was doing their own thing. And not in a bad way, but there wasn't any sort of cohesiveness across the board so that students across the entire so we could be assured, if you will, that students across the entire city were going to be having the same sort of interactions with AI tools. So some of the questions that they asked us were, where do you feel confident versus uncertain about AI usage right now? Now, as much as I am an advocate and proponent of AI tools, because I definitely can see the value and have already experienced firsthand the impact of AI tools on my work as a director of tech, as a consultant, as an educator. I definitely recognize that there are some things that I'm very uncertain about. And some of those things is related to um, how do we know what the limits are? Like, how far is too far when it comes to using AI in this particular setting? We're talking the K-12 setting where we have users who are ranging, potential users, right? That are ranging from our littlest guys in like elementary school all the way up to high school. What is the barrier when it comes to teachers? Where do we draw the line with them using AI to support their teaching? Do we let them create assessments? Do we let them do their lesson planning? Do we let them do what? Like, where does the limit stop? And so trying to figure out how to rein that in and actually rein it in is something I'm very uncertain about, because how do you do it when we know that these tools are accessible to people outside of the workplace? The second question here was, how are students interacting with AI both in and outside of school? I think we kind of just have to all assume that our kids are interacting with AI tools. Those who are old enough, right, are interacting with AI tools in some capacity. I'm not 100% certain that our kids are fully integrated into using in a school setting. I think there's still some taboo for kids. I think kids are still thinking about this as something that their teacher's going to frown upon if they find out that they're using it. Not that they're not using it, but I don't think they're ready to admit I used AI at school to do this thing. And so how do we gauge that? How do we know if they're using it inside or outside of school? I do think that paying attention to our students, their skill set as we know them outside of technology, and comparing the output to them normally versus them with the AI support or a tool, I think we can definitely see a difference. But I think the true indicator of whether or not a child will be using AI or is using AI well would be on whether or not we can see an ongoing improvement, not only in the work that they're turning in, but in their interactions in class and so on. The third thing that they asked us about, was what concerns feel the most urgent to address. And I'll be honest, because we have an AI policy already kind of in place and it's a pretty intense policy. We have 8 pages, 8 page document that we've put together. I didn't feel like the policy and guardrails part was as urgent as it is for some campuses that don't have a policy at all. I do feel like that's top of mind for a lot of school districts, school leaders, etc. But for us, I think the most urgent thing is addressing the equity of AI usage, and not just outside of school. I know a lot of times when we talk about EdTech and we talk about the equity of resources, we kind of focus on what do kids have at home. But I think we also have to focus on the skill set of the teachers inside of the building and their willingness to embrace these tools. And an example that kind of popped in my mind is like, let's say we have two teachers at a high school that both teach the same subject to the same grade level of students. We have Miss Jones and Miss Smith. And let's say Miss Jones is definitely with that forward thinking, innovative teacher, and she's using AI. She's using it to help her with her lessons. She's using it to help her grade her papers. She's using it to help give feedback to students. She's created her own little chat bot that helps answers questions for students when she may be tied up with another student so they don't have to wait for her to respond. She is an active user and she's thinking intentionally about what is it she would like from her students are using AI, etc. And she has really clear uh guidelines for what work should look like when AI is being used. And then we may have the other teacher who's not using it at all, who's just completely anti it. She doesn't care if we're allowing it. In her space, it's not allowed. Now we have an equity gap internally that I feel most concerned about. And I'm really concerned about how to address that. Where do we draw the line between forcing people to use AI tools who may have real reasons that they are choosing not to? Could be morals, could be environmental reasons. Like, where do we draw the line with telling people they have to use something versus it's an optional thing? And of course, something being optional means you're going to risk having that equity gap. The fourth thing that they asked was what district supports would be helpful in the next 30 to 60 days. And honestly, I couldn't think of anything at the present moment that I could see our district providing other than maybe additional trainings, a list of vetted and approved and recommended AI tools from them that the school should be considering on using, that sort of thing. But because we are the people who are helping to build the district's policy, I'm not sure what the district could give us at this present time. The fifth thing that they covered was what early resourcing or fiscal considerations are already emerging. So, where are people concerned about the cost of this? Meaning, how many AI tools do we actually need to be using? Is it possible to have one that does it all? Or are we going to find ourselves in a situation where we have multiple subscriptions to multiple AI related tools? Because, as I mentioned earlier, they do some specific things. And so we want that tool. And I think we kind of running into that right now at my school. We're using obviously Gemini and NotebookLM are our preferred and recommended tools. But then we also have another thing that we got as a replacement for Turnitin. I think you all can, some of you who are EdTech people out there know exactly what Turnitin is. But it's basically a way to kind of like, it's an AI tool, once again, that kind of scans and checks the work and things of that nature. So again, we're already dealing with multiple AI tools that we're using currently. And so I'm just concerned about how this cost could start to tick up over time as more teachers in more subject areas are finding tools that are best for their subject area versus others and saying, hey, well, I teach math, I teach science, and I want this too. And I think this is great for my kids. What do we do? Do we get it all, or do we just kind of like rein it all in and say, let's focus on what tools are going to get the best outcomes for the most students, not just your individual needs that you're finding out there? So yeah, that's kind of where we kind of left off our conversation. We didn't even really get to go full in because we were all geeked out and excited to be there. I'll be honest with you. But it was definitely a wonderful experience. And I am so looking forward to coming back and giving you all these recap episodes along with our standard podcast episodes, because I want to take you with me on this journey, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with you. Hey, before we get out of here, make sure you smash that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. And share this out with at least 5 people you know who work in K-12 education. Well, we have come to the end of another episode of Get Innovative, the podcast, and I am so glad that you were here to join me. And I'm looking forward to sharing more and more with you as I go on this journey as a part of the NOLA Public Schools AI Task Force. But before you get out of here, I need you to go ahead on over to www.wegetinnovated.com and make sure you book your 30-minute strategy audit. This audit is going to give us a high-level overview of where your school or district is as it relates to technology implementation and integration. And we're going to talk about some next steps and recommendations for you on how we can start to move the needle forward towards creating a more intentional and equitable technology ecosystem at your school. Can't wait to work with you. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.